This happened just a few weeks ago. I was working as a part-time security guard at an old factory. I took this job to help pay for my classes at community college. It was a good way to make some cash, but I've never stopped thinking about how creepy it was there. On my first few nights, everything felt normal. I'd sit in my chair, listening to the sound of the wind rattling loose windows. The factory was huge and dark. Shadows played tricks on my mind. I kept telling myself to stay focused. I walked the empty halls, checking doors and flicking on the lights. It was quiet, almost too quiet for my liking. But then, on my third night, something odd happened. Around 2 a.m. I heard rhythmic thumps coming from the far end of the factory. They were almost like footsteps. My skin prickled at the sound. It felt like they were getting closer. I grabbed my flashlight and headed toward the noise, but when I got there, it was just a room full of old machines. Everything was still. I shook it off, but I couldn't get rid of the chill that ran down my spine. As the night went on, the thumping returned. This time, it was mixed with whispers. I wasn't sure if I was imagining it. I felt my heart racing as I glanced around the room. I took a deep breath, trying to convince myself it was nothing, but the shadows seemed to twist as I moved. I swore I saw a figure darting in the corner of my eye just before it vanished. Each time I turned my head, there was nothing there. It was unnerving. By the fourth night, the whispers grew louder. They were like soft voices, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. It felt wrong. I kept thinking I was being watched. The factory felt alive, but it wasn't friendly. The air was thick, and I could feel something shifting in the darkness. I kept hearing my name echoing between the machines. My mind played tricks on me. Then I caught a flash of movement. I turned to see something in my peripheral. My heart raced as I focused on the spot. I thought I saw someone watching me from behind a giant rusty pillar. It was just a shape, but it felt like a person. My hands went sweaty as I took a step closer, but the moment I did, it disappeared. Just smoke and shadows. I felt a knot in my stomach. Was it real? Had I really seen someone? The whispers got louder, almost screaming. Then there was a whisper that echoed my name. I turned, but nobody was there. The room felt darker, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone anymore. The next night felt heavier. I stepped into the factory, ready for another shift. My body was on high alert. I had told myself I would leave if anything strange happened again. But I needed the money, and my fear was battling my need to stay. I took a deep breath and switched on my flashlight, pushing forward into the shadows. As I walked through the familiar cold halls, I remembered the sounds from the nights before. The whispers, the thumps, they echoed in my mind, refusing to fade away. I stopped every few steps, listening. The silence felt charged, like holding my breath before diving in. Then a chilling sound broke the stillness. A loud crash emerged from the room, where I'd first heard the whispers. Instinctively, I turned towards the noise. My heart thudded in my chest as I moved closer. The flashlight beam hit the doorway, illuminating a chaotic scene. Metal scraps littered the floor, and one of the old machines stood ajar like it had been forced open. That's when I saw it. A figure darted across the room, blending into the shadows before I could blink. I froze. My mind raced to grasp what I had seen. Was it a trick of the light? Was it real? I couldn't let fear win. I had to know. I took a step inside, my pulse racing. Each creak of the floor sent jolts through my body. "Hello?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. No answer. Just silence. I scanned the room. It was empty. I took another step forward, my flashlight revealing the eerie contours of the machines. The whispers had returned, softer this time, just under my breath. They seemed to swirl around me. Then I noticed something on the floor, a scrap of fabric caught on one of the gears. I knelt down to get a closer look. It was frayed, dark-colored. I hesitated, but picked it up. Maybe it belonged to someone. My thoughts raced. Was there really some kind of haunting at this place? Who or what was causing this? Suddenly the air grew thick again. I felt a heavy presence. It wrapped around me, making it hard to breathe. I dropped the fabric, ready to run, but a voice broke through the whispers. It was low and haunting, yet familiar. My name again. Jordan. I spun around, shining my flashlight in every direction, but there was no one. The lights flickered above me. Panic surged through my veins. I dashed for the exit, but something stopped me mid-step. A shadow formed in the doorway, blocking my way. I squinted and my breath caught in my throat. The figure who I thought was a trick of my mind was right there. Hollow eyes stared back at me. Just as panic overwhelmed me, everything went dark. The lights died, plunging the factory into a suffocating darkness. I fumbled with my flashlight, but all I could think was that I needed to escape. I couldn't tell where the figure had gone or if it was still there with me. And then I felt it. A cold hand grasped my shoulder from behind. I turned, but there was nothing, just shadows dancing against the walls. The factory was alive with all its whispers, and I was trapped inside it. I stood frozen in the dark, heart racing, eyes darting. The silence pressed heavily against my ears, amplifying every small sound, the drip of water somewhere in the distance, the faint rustle of something unseen moving in the shadows. I wanted to call for help, but my voice felt stuck in my throat. I forced myself to take a breath, to focus. The flashlight flickered to life, narrowly cutting through the darkness. I scanned the room, ready to confront whatever was lurking. But there was nothing, just the debris and the ghostly outline of machinery. My pulse was still racing, the anxiety coiling tighter. Then I remembered the fabric I had dropped. The thought of it made me uneasy. I had to find it again. Backtracking slowly, I focused the beam of light on the ground, feeling panic claw at me. Was that whispering getting louder? I squinted, but all I could see was the debris scattered across the floor. Please just let this be over, I muttered to myself, kneeling to search. As my fingers brushed against the floor, I felt a slight shift in the air. It was like the factory was holding its breath, waiting. And then I found the fabric. It was crumpled, dark, tangled in the gears. As I stood, clutching it tightly, an urgent thought shot through my mind. Maybe it belonged to someone who had come before me, someone who might have had the same experience. My heartbeat quickened at the idea of unraveling some mystery. I needed answers. But just as I turned to leave, the whispers changed. They weren't just murmurs anymore. They twisted into words, jagged and frantic. Jordan, help us. Instinct kicked in, and I bolted toward the exit. My breath became uneven, but I wasn't looking back. I stumbled on the uneven ground, each step feeling like it might be my last. The light from my flashlight flickered again. Was it the battery, or was something playing tricks on me? Suddenly I heard footsteps behind me, heavy, hurried, growing louder. I sprinted into the dark hallway, the beam barely illuminating my way. I couldn't open the door fast enough. I needed to get out. But as I reached the exit, it swung shut with a loud thud. I pushed against it, but it wouldn't budge. "Let me out!" I shouted, my voice echoing against the cold metal walls. Panic surged through me again. I was trapped. Then the whispers intensified around me, almost as if they were responding to my fear. I swirled around, searching for the shadows. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice weak yet defiant. The factory groaned like it was alive, and in that moment I knew I wasn't alone. The figure emerged again, pushing out of the shadows, its hollow eyes locking onto mine. I took a step back, my breath caught in my throat. Was this the person behind the whispers? In that moment, everything went silent. The factory held its breath, waiting for something to happen. And then I felt that cold grip on my shoulder again, tighter this time. I turned to face it head-on. "What do you want?" I managed to croak, but the figure just stared. The air grew colder as dread pooled in my stomach. I was lost in a nightmare, and I didn't know how to wake up. I stared at the figure, feeling the chill seep deeper into my bones. My mind raced, searching for a rational explanation, anything to hold on to. But all I could do was stand frozen as its hollow eyes seemed to absorb everything around us. "Please, say something," I whispered, my voice barely above a breath. It didn't respond. It just continued to stare, the darkness behind it swirling like smoke. I thought of running again, but my legs felt like they were glued to the worn floor. Then it moved closer. The air thickened with a sense of dread, and I could see thin strands of something, hair, hanging down like wisps of fog around its face. I clutched the fabric tighter, and suddenly a memory sparked in my mind. I had seen something like this before in an old photo at the archives. Was this figure connected to the stories I'd heard about the factory? With renewed courage, I took a step forward. Are you stuck here? Did you need help?" I stammered. The figure tilted its head slightly, almost as if considering my words. Then the whispers surged again, but this time they felt different, more cohesive. "Find us, in the light." "Who?" I asked, close to panic. My flashlight flickered again, casting erratic shadows that danced along the walls. Sweat trickled down my back. Just then, the lights overhead flashed to life, bathing the entire room in a blinding white glow. I squinted against the brightness, hands shielding my eyes. When I looked again, the figure had vanished. My heart raced, but I had no time to process it. The door to the hallway creaked open, revealing a long corridor bathed in shadows once more. It felt like an invitation and a warning. With nowhere else to go, I stepped into the light-filled room. The fabric in my hand seemed to thrum against my skin, urging me, pulling me forward. As I moved deeper into the corridor, the whispers coiled around me, tugging at the edges of my sanity. I felt like I was being guided, but by what? I turned a corner and found myself in a large room filled with machinery. The soft whir of gears echoed through the space, but it was the sight of what lay ahead that made my blood run cold. Scattered across the floor were more pieces of fabric, some torn, some intact, all familiar. It was like a piece of a larger puzzle, one I desperately needed to solve. Then I saw something glinting on a nearby table, a small metal badge, filthy but still recognizable. My pulse quickened. I reached out, fingers brushing against its surface. That's when I saw it. In faded letters it read, "Guard." The weight of realization crashed over me. I was not the first to walk these halls, and now I understood. The whispers weren't just a plea, they were a warning from those who had come before me. I bolted back toward the exit, heart thumping, mind racing. What did it all mean? Were the guards trapped here because of their duty? I needed to escape before it was too late. But the shadows moved again. I was not alone. Panic surged as I rushed back to the door, but before I could reach it, the whispering chorus swelled. "Join us." That chilling invitation sent me sprinting into the darkness, but the dread followed close behind. I could feel it creeping up my spine. The moment I turned the corner, a deep shadow pooled in front of me, blocking the path I had hoped to take. My heart raced as I skidded to a halt. The air felt heavy, thick with a suffocating dread that made it hard to breathe. I squinted into the darkness, searching for signs of movement. But all I could see was the unsettling swirl of black. "Who's there?" I called, my voice shaking. No answer, just the silence that seemed to taunt me. I stepped backward, desperate to retrace my steps, but the whispers surged again. "Stay with us." I choked on my fear. "What do you want?" Just then, a soft clank echoed from the darkness, breaking the stillness. A shape began to emerge, slightly illuminated by the flickering overhead lights. It was a figure, but not like the one I had seen before. It was smaller, hunched, and the edges of its form seemed to blend into the shadows. I took another step back, and that's when I felt it, something cold and metallic brushing against my leg. I glanced down to see a rusted chain, coiled like a serpent. My breath caught in my throat. I pulled away, my heart pounding louder, thrumming against my ribcage. "Find us! Join us!" The voice rolled over me like a tide, so familiar yet alien. I turned, ready to flee in the other direction, but stumbled. Another movement caught my eye, more fabric, fluttering like a ghost, caught between two machines. I hesitated, torn between the promise of escape down the corridor and the haunting fabric swaying in the dim light. Driven by an urgency I couldn't name, I reached for the fabric, fingers trembling. As soon as I touched it, an image flashed in my mind. I saw guards donning the fabric, smiles frozen in time, and then I felt pain, a sharp jolt that made me gasp. The darkness around me thickened, pulling back the veil on the factory's past. A tragedy, a betrayal. I yanked my hand back in horror, the whispers growing louder, more insistent. "Help us! Don't leave!" "No!" I shouted, my voice cracking. As I turned to run, the smaller figure lunged forward, its movements jerky and unnatural. I darted sideways, barely evading it, but the corridor felt like a maze closing in around me. Running, I searched for a door, a place to hide, but no matter how many turns I took, the shadows grew thicker, wrapping around me tighter until I could barely see. The piercing whispers clawed at my mind, crowding my thoughts. Then, without warning, the lights flickered again. The small figure reappeared, its face inches from mine, pale and slack. I froze, terror rooting me in place. "Join us!" it rasped, its voice a twisted echo of the others. That's when, in the fading light, I caught sight of what lay behind it. A door. Just beyond that door, a chance to escape. But would it lead me to safety, or deeper into the darkness? With a frantic burst of adrenaline, I pushed past the figure, sprinting toward the door, praying it would open. My hand grasped the handle. It was now or never. I twisted, and just as I did, the whispers crescendoed to a deafening roar. Then everything went dark. When I came to, the world was still cloaked in darkness. I lay on a cold concrete floor, disoriented, every muscle in my body tense. The air held a damp chill that chilled me to the bone. I blinked, trying to sharpen my senses, but shadows danced just beyond the stream of dim light, filtering through cracks in the walls. "Where am I?" I whispered to myself, my voice barely breaking the silence. I pushed myself up slowly, fighting through the wave of dizziness threatening to pull me back down. The echoes of the whispers still lingered, faint but undeniable. I could almost swear I felt a tug at the edge of my mind. I scanned my surroundings. Pillars lined the room, and ahead I caught the silhouette of another door, slightly ajar, just inviting enough to pique my interest. I moved toward it, each step echoing in the stillness. My instincts screamed at me to turn back, but curiosity drove me forward. As I neared the door, I noticed symbols etched into the concrete floor, intricate designs worn down by time. They twisted and turned, overlapping with one another, weaving a story I couldn't quite decipher. The figures seemed familiar, hints of the fabric I had touched before swirling in my memory. Suddenly, a low hum filled the air. The approaching sound grew louder, vibrating through the ground. Panic surged within me. I glanced back, half expecting the small figure to appear, but the darkness remained still, watching. What now? I was losing precious time. I forced myself to focus and pushed through the door. As soon as I stepped inside, I discovered another long corridor, this one lit intermittently by flickering fluorescent lights. My heart raced anew, urging me to run, but the softness of the floor beneath me and the cold air pressing against my skin kept me slow and careful. I crept forward, aware of every crack and creak echoing in response. Then something caught my eye. A series of photos pinned to the walls. Faces stared back at me, each expression etched with joy. There were families, friends, people in uniforms, all smiling as if they held secret happiness. But the further I walked, the more the images changed. The last two photographs froze me in place. The faces were no longer smiling. They looked haunted, eyes wide and mouths slightly open, as if they had been caught in a moment of sheer terror. My breath caught in my throat. I turned to leave, but something suddenly shifted behind me. "Help us!" A new voice, different from the others, slithered through the air. It wasn't just whispers anymore. It was a plea, desperate and raw. I froze again, dread pooling in my stomach. I turned slowly, and there it was, a figure standing at the end of the corridor. I couldn't see its face, but I felt its gaze heavy upon me. I wanted to scream, to run, but my feet felt cemented to the ground. "Join us!" it repeated, and in an instant I realized it wasn't just a voice. It was an echo of the lost. A shiver ran down my spine. In that moment, I thought of the fabric, the whispers, the history tied to this place. If I didn't find a way out, there was a chance I could become just another face on these walls. I spun around, determined to move, but the corridor stretched endlessly in front of me. Panic surged again. I had to escape, but how? That's when I saw it. A shadow shifting at the far end, moving toward me with purpose. I couldn't hesitate any longer. I charged down the corridor, the weight of the whispers chasing me as I raced back into the darkness. I ran, the darkness swirling around me like a living thing. My breath came in sharp bursts, echoing off the corridor walls that closed in with every step. Each flickering fluorescent light above me buzzed angrily, casting jagged shadows that threatened to engulf me. Then I heard it again, the faint plea from before. "Help us!" The voice felt closer now, more urgent. I risked a glance over my shoulder, and my heart sank. The figure hadn't moved, but it loomed like a storm cloud, pulsing with malevolence. I pushed myself harder, adrenaline coursing through me. I needed to find a way out, a window, a door, anything that would lead me back into the light. Up ahead, another door appeared, stark against the gloom. I sprinted toward it, praying it wasn't just another trap. As I reached the door, my fingers trembled against the cold handle. The sounds behind me intensified, a low, guttural noise rising in rhythm with my racing heart. I swung the door open and barreled inside, slamming it shut behind me. The room was small. The walls painted a sterile white, creating a stark contrast to the oppressive darkness outside. I leaned against the door, trying to catch my breath. It was quiet here, too quiet. No whispers, no pleas. I hoped that meant I was safe, but instinct told me otherwise. In front of me stood a large observation window. It looked out into another darkened room, the shadows huddled together in a chaotic dance. It was filled with the same symbols I had seen on the floor before, only now they glowed faintly, as if pulsing with a heartbeat. As I drew closer, I noticed movement among the symbols. They seemed to form shapes, twisting into recognizable figures, those same haunted faces from the photographs. Their eyes stared back at me, painfully aware, pleading for release. A figure stepped into view inside the adjoining room, a vast silhouette framed by the eerie glow. I couldn't make out any features, but I felt the weight of its gaze piercing through me. Confusion washed over me. Was this another trap? A guardian? Or something worse? Suddenly the air became heavy, pressing against my chest. Instinctively I stepped back from the window. That's when I saw the reflection in the glass behind me. A fleeting image. A child, pale and ghostly, standing at the door, watching with wide eyes. I whipped around, heart pounding, but there was nothing, just empty air and the door firmly shut. "Hey!" I yelled, panic creeping back in. This wasn't just some ghost playing tricks. Something was wrong here, and the urgency wrapped itself around me tighter. Then I heard it again, this time louder and from the window. "Join us!" It wasn't just a whisper. It was a chorus, the faces from before, united in a haunting ballad of despair. I staggered back, adrenaline pumping through me again. I had to escape this place. I turned on my heel and sprinted back toward the door, my mind racing with questions. Who were they? What happened here? I needed answers, but I also needed to get out before I became another voice in their chorus. As I flung the door open again, I was met with the dark corridor, feeling more like a maze than ever. It twisted and turned, and for a moment I lost my bearings. Then everything shifted. A loud crash echoed somewhere behind me. The figure was coming, and it wasn't alone. I took a deep breath, knowing there was no turning back now. With my heart in my throat, I plunged back into the darkness, seeking whatever escape I could find. I darted into the corridor, my heart racing as I focused on the sounds behind me. The crash had rattled the building, and now a cacophony of footsteps echoed off the walls, heavy and chaotic. The figure was closing in. I didn't know how much time I had. As I ran, I could barely make sense of my surroundings. The flickering lights cast disorienting shadows, each one reminiscent of the faces I'd just seen. The walls felt like they were closing in, squeezing the air from my lungs. I had to keep moving, keep fighting. I rounded a corner and my instinct kicked in. I needed to find a place to hide. A door appeared on my right, barely visible in the gloom. I didn't think twice. I shoved it open and slipped inside, shutting it softly behind me. The room was dark, but I could see a faint outline of shelves filled with boxes. My fingertips grazed the cool surface of one as I ducked behind it, hoping to blend into the shadows. I held my breath and listened. The footsteps grew closer. My heart pounded in my ears, drowning out the faint whispers that lingered in the air. I hoped they'd pass by. I felt the weight of despair pressing down on me. Would it ever end? Then a new noise, an unspeakable sound, a low growl that reverberated through the walls. I peeked out from my hiding spot. A sliver of light slipped under the door, strong enough to illuminate 2 feet standing right in front. My breath caught. It was the figure. I strained to hear any sign of what it was doing. For a moment, silence enveloped the room, thick with dread. Then a soft thump, as if it had leaned against the door. I held my breath, praying it wouldn't come in. Suddenly, a metallic clink cut through the air. I glanced at the boxes, searching for another way out. I'd have to move. I scrambled to the side and noticed a small window at the far wall, partially covered in grime. A burst of hope ignited inside me. I darted toward the window and tugged at it. It was stuck. The growl from outside deepened, more agitated now. I had to make this work. I leaned into it, pushing harder until it finally gave way, the window flying open with a screech. Cool night air rushed in, filling my lungs with the promise of escape. I climbed up, but as I glanced back at the door, the figure was no longer outside. My heart dropped. It had slipped into the room behind me. I pulled myself through the window just in time, feeling the arms of a cold breeze wrap around me. I landed awkwardly outside, the ground hard and unforgiving. I turned, peering back into the dark room. I caught a glimpse of the figure silhouetted against the light from the door. It shifted, its form bending like a shadow. I couldn't stay here. I had to find cover. I began to run again, not knowing where I was going. All I knew was that I couldn't let it catch me. Fear surged through me as I stumbled back into the night, glancing around frantically for safety. And then, out of nowhere, I heard a familiar voice, soft but clear. "Help us!" My blood ran cold. It was the same plea, echoing through the night. I stopped in my tracks. That's when I saw it, a figure standing under a flickering streetlight, watching me with haunting familiarity. I froze, heart hammering in my chest, and I wondered if I was truly free or if this was just the beginning. I couldn't move. The figure under the light felt like a ghost from my past, an echo of everything that haunted me. I squinted, trying to make out any details. The streetlight cast an eerie glow, but the face remained obscured. "Help us!" The voice came again, sharp and desperate, yet strangely familiar. I stepped forward against my better judgment. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice trembling. The figure didn't answer. Instead, it gestured for me to come closer. My instincts screamed at me to turn and run, but something held me in place. Then the shadows shifted, and I saw them, the faces of others, peering out from behind the figure, their eyes wide with fear. They looked like... No, it couldn't be. "Please," the figure urged, stepping closer into the light. It took my breath away. It was someone I had lost long ago, someone whose absence created a void in my heart. "What happened to you?" I whispered, my voice barely coming out. I fought back tears as memories flooded my mind, lost laughter, missed moments. "Not here," the figure said urgently, scanning the shadows. "We need to leave, now." I felt a pull, something deeper than fear. A connection rooted in memories I thought I'd buried. Just then, the air shifted. A chill slid down my spine, and the ground beneath us trembled. The growl returned, louder this time, shaking the surroundings. The shadows were closing in, the figure behind me lurking. "Go!" It was such a simple command, but it shattered whatever spell had held me. I turned and ran, the familiar voice fading behind me as I fled across the street into an alley, my heart pounding with panic. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I glanced over my shoulder but saw nothing. The alley was narrow and confined, the walls slick and grimy. I pressed myself against the cold, damp brick, trying to catch my breath. Suddenly, I heard the sounds of footsteps, heavy and unforgiving, echoing through the alley. My pulse quickened. They were close. I clutched my stomach, hoping that if I stayed still, I'd avoid detection. Shadows danced around me, and breathing felt like a chore. And then I saw it. A figure appeared at the end of the alley, partially obscured by the darkness, taller, menacing. It moved with a purpose, as if it had been hunting me the whole time. I pressed further into the wall, hoping to disappear. The footsteps faded briefly, but the figure didn't retreat. "There's nowhere to run," it growled, its voice slithering through the gloom. Panic surged. I had to find an exit. I forced myself into action, heart racing. With a push, I bolted to the right, turning corner after corner, desperate for a way out. The growling grew louder, more frenzied. I could feel its breath, hot and heavy on my neck. Then I stumbled into a larger street, headlights pouring over me like a flood. I turned around but no longer saw the figure. It was gone, swallowed by the shadows. In that moment, I caught my breath, but the familiar voice came back to me. "Help us!" It echoed in my mind as the reality of my situation dawned on me. I wasn't just being chased. I was part of something much darker, something that I couldn't escape. The question nagged at me, unraveling my nerves. What if I wasn't alone in this? That's when I realized something was waiting for me in the darkness, something that would soon reveal itself. I sprinted down the street, the air cool against my skin, and the pulse of adrenaline still pounding in my ears. The shadows loomed behind me, but I refused to look back any longer. I had to focus ahead. I had felt the darkness close in too many times to let myself falter now. But that voice echoed relentlessly. "Help us!" It chimed in my mind as though it were some warped lullaby, pulling threads of anxiety taut. I was caught up in something sinister, and deep down I knew I had to confront it. Just as I reached a street corner, I spotted a police car parked lazily by the curb, lights shimmering under the street lamp. I dashed over and pounded my fist against the hood. A figure inside startled awake, eyes wide. "Officer, you need to help me," I gasped, my voice cracking under the weight of urgency. The cop opened the door reluctantly, squinting against the bright light of the street lamps. "What's going on?" he asked, his brow furrowed. "There's something in the factory," I stammered, pointing frantically back toward the direction I had come. "People, shadows, it's not safe." He frowned, looking skeptical. "I can't go on some wild goose chase based on your panic." His tone was dismissive, as if I were merely a nuisance waking him from a nap. "No, you don't understand. They need help." I was desperate now, throwing my hands in the air as if to brandish my point. He sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. "Look, I'll check it out, but you need to calm down first. How do I know you're not just imagining things?" As if summoned by my very thoughts, a deep growl interrupted our conversation from across the street. The sound echoed through the night air, chilling us both. The officer's eyes widened, but he remained planted by the car. "That's it! We need to leave!" I shouted, urging him to take a stand. The officer's instincts kicked in. He gestured for me to get in, and I scrambled into the passenger seat. With the engine revving, we pulled out, the beams from the car illuminating the street. I thought of the factory, the shadows, the countless faces of those trapped. Whatever it was that haunted those halls lurked just beneath the surface, ready to ensnare the unsuspecting. As we drove back toward the factory, my mind raced with questions. Who were those people? What had happened in that place? I glanced back, half expecting to see a shadow scurrying behind the car. But there was nothing but darkness swallowing the road behind us. After some hesitation, the cop parked about a block away from the entrance. "Stay put," he commanded, stepping out cautiously. I watched as he approached the factory with all the bravado of a man unprepared for the storms lurking within. My heart pounded in my chest as I glanced outside. Shadows danced along the walls, illuminated sporadically by passing streetlights. Finally, he reached the entrance and vanished inside, leaving me alone to contemplate the threat. As the minutes stretched on, dread clamored in my skull. Did I just lead him into danger? The thought gnawed at me. I couldn't sit still. My instincts screamed that I had to go in after him. Clenching my teeth, I swung open the door. Cold air rushed in like a warning, and I took a deep breath, stepping into the nightmarish gloom. Moving toward the factory, I felt the whispers tug at the edges of my consciousness, a low murmur that grew louder with each step. Inside, the ambience thickened as I crept forward. My flashlight flickered, low battery. As I fumbled with it, the echoes of my own footsteps felt like a countdown. I had to find him and dig deeper into this unsettling pull. The factory was alive. I could hear the machines groan, could feel the walls closing in on me. I followed the faint glow of the officer's flashlight deeper into the core of the structure. My heartbeat synchronized with my footfalls, each beat another reminder of how close I was to the unknown. Suddenly, the whispers shifted again. They morphed into a chorus, a cacophony of voices reverberating off the steel walls. "Join us," they chanted, wrapping around me as I ducked into one of the larger rooms. The officer wasn't there, just rusted machinery and remnants of a past long buried. With a trembling heart, I scanned the place. Was I too late? And then I spotted it, a large sheet of fabric, dark and frayed, snagged on a piece of machinery, fluttered ominously. Was it the same material from before? My breath quickened as I approached cautiously, feeling unseen eyes creeping toward me. But as I reached for the fabric, a cold breeze swept through the room, causing it to wave violently. Shadows converged around me. The figure, the heavy presence from before, snaked into view, its hollow eyes pinning me in place. "Help us!" it urged again. "No!" I shouted, my voice breaking. I spun around, scrambling toward the nearest exit. I was not ready for this, not ready to face whatever lay beyond. And then I remembered the officer. I couldn't abandon him. As the growl returned, I fought through the tension, plunging deeper into the factory. "Where are you?" I called out, desperately hoping he would hear me. Shadows flickered in corners, but there was no response. A vacant silence. Finally, I spotted a faint light ahead. I dashed toward it, adrenaline fueling my escape. I reached the source, a small office with crumpled papers strewn across the worn-out desk. But the officer wasn't here. And just then, the air around me thickened. I turned, shielding my eyes as the growl crescendoed into a roar, vibrating through the walls. I felt it, a rush of cold air, like fingers wrapping around my throat, trying to suffocate me. Instinct kicked in. I tore back into the hallway, the walls breathing with a life of their own, the whispers intertwined with growls, feeding off my panic. I ran blindly, echoing my desperate footsteps, searching for anything resembling an exit. I spotted the distant glow of lights, a promise of safety, or was it another trap? Another wave of desperation surged. I plunged forward, the weight of all those voices crashing down. With one last push, I reached the door that screamed of freedom. Breathing laboriously, I flung it open. But the world beyond wasn't what I expected. Sentinels of shadows filled the corridor without end, faces peering back at me, twisting in anguish. I was faced with a choice, the darkness of the factory or the haunting pleas of the past. I wanted to escape, yet the promise of their help tugged at my heart. "Please don't leave us." With everything within me, I knew the truth. This wasn't just their battle. It was mine now too. This dark legacy needed resolution. I'd find the officer and uncover what had happened here, facing whatever came next. But there was no guarantee that I would remain whole in the process. Every decision weighed heavy, compounded with uncertainty. Still, as I felt the warmth of the distant streetlight flickering in my mind, I turned back. Not every shadow was meant to engulf me. And I had no intention of becoming another face on the walls. My fight had just begun.